What if traveling through time came with a price? A price so terrifying that survivors of these journeys are still paying it right now. Burning. Not from fire, not from chemicals, but from something far more disturbing, something that shouldn't be possible. These 10 people claim they've traveled through time, and every single one of them is now living with scars, burns, and wounds that science cannot explain. Are you ready to hear their stories? Number 10, the hiker who walked into light. This case is absolutely chilling, and once you hear it, you'll understand why it opens our list. Imagine you're an experienced outdoorsman, someone who has spent over 15 years navigating the most remote wilderness on Earth. You know the mountains like the back of your hand. You trust your instincts, your equipment, your training, and then one afternoon, everything you thought you understood about reality simply stops making sense. In August of 1987, a 34-year-old geology researcher named Marcus Lindqvist set out on a solo expedition across the Hardangervidda Plateau in Norway. This wasn't his first time. Marcus had crossed these mountains dozens of times before, studying rock formations and documenting geological anomalies. The weather was clear, his route was mapped, and he had supplies for a 3-day trek. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. Until it wasn't. On the second day of his expedition, Marcus radioed back to base camp with a strange report. He described an atmospheric disturbance unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. The air around him was shimmering like heat waves rising from hot pavement. But here's the thing, the temperature was near freezing. There was no heat source anywhere. Marcus, ever the scientist, tried to document what he was seeing, and then his final transmission came through. He described a wall of white light rising directly from the ground ahead of him. His voice was calm but confused, and then silence. No distress signal, no further contact, nothing. Search teams were deployed within hours. They found his campsite completely intact. His equipment was untouched, his tent still standing, his supplies exactly where he'd left them. But there were no footprints leading away from the site. It was as if Marcus had simply ceased to exist. After 72 hours of intensive searching, he was officially declared missing. But then, on day 5, something impossible happened. A rescue helicopter spotted a figure lying motionless 12 kilometers from the original campsite. It was Marcus. He was unconscious, curled in a fetal position on the bare rock. When the medics reached him, they froze. His exposed skin was covered in severe burns, his face, his hands, his forearms, all of it damaged by what appeared to be intense heat. But there had been no fire, no explosion, no logical source. Hospital examinations revealed something even more disturbing. The burns appeared to originate from inside his tissue, radiating outward rather than penetrating inward like normal thermal injuries. Thermal imaging showed his core body temperature locked at 38.9 degrees Celsius. It wouldn't stabilize. It wouldn't drop. His body was burning from within. When Marcus regained consciousness, he was confused about the time that had passed. He believed only a few minutes had elapsed since he'd seen the light, but 5 days were gone. When asked what happened, his account sent shivers through everyone who heard it. He described walking toward the wall of light, unable to stop himself. He said it felt like gravity pulling sideways, dragging him forward against his will. He stepped through and found himself in the same landscape, but everything was wrong. The vegetation was gone. The sky was tinted red, and the heat was unbearable. His skin began burning immediately. He saw structures in the distance, geometric shapes that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist. He heard a low hum vibrating through his bones, and then he was pulled backward violently and woke up on the ground 5 days later. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. Marcus's burns never fully healed. Every 6 to 8 weeks, his skin temperature spikes without warning, and the burns re-emerge as fresh wounds. Medical records document over 200 of these thermal episodes between 1987 and 2003. Doctors have no explanation. Marcus himself believes that part of him still exists in that other place, and that place is still burning him. Did Marcus Lindqvist walk through a tear in time itself? Is he caught between two realities, one foot in our world and one in a dimension of endless fire? Whatever happened on that plateau, he's been paying for it ever since. And this is only case 10. Trust me, the cases ahead are far more disturbing. Number 9, the bright corridor. This case is so strange, so visually disturbing, that even now, years later, researchers are still trying to explain what happened. Imagine you're on your morning jog, the same route you've taken hundreds of times before. The sun is just rising, the air is crisp, and the world feels peaceful. Then suddenly, without any warning, reality itself splits open in front of you, and what happens next will mark your body forever. In March of 2019, a 28-year-old office worker named Yuki Tanaka was jogging through Yoyogi Park in Tokyo. It was 6:15 in the morning. The park was nearly empty. Just a few other early risers scattered along the paths. Yuki had run this exact route so many times she could do it with her eyes closed. But on this particular morning, something felt different. The air around her suddenly became heavy, thick, almost like she was pushing through water. Her legs felt sluggish, even though she hadn't changed her pace. As she approached a grove of cherry trees, the ground beneath her seemed to fold, not collapse, not shake, fold, like fabric being creased. And then she saw it. A blinding vertical line of light appeared directly ahead of her, standing in empty air like a doorway to somewhere else. Yuki later described it as a corridor, a tunnel of pure radiance that had no business existing in a Tokyo park at dawn. She tried to stop running. She tried to turn away, but her body moved without her permission, drawn toward the light as if something was pulling her forward. Her fingers touched the luminous surface, and everything went white. A park maintenance worker found Yuki unconscious at 7:45 that morning. She was lying in the grass near the cherry trees, completely unresponsive, but it was her arms that made him call emergency services immediately. From her fingertips all the way to her shoulders, Yuki's skin was covered in severe burns. The patterns were unlike anything the paramedics had ever seen. They weren't random. They formed parallel lines, almost geometric, like circuits etched into her flesh. The burns looked deliberate, designed, as if someone had carefully drawn them onto her body. Emergency responders initially suspected a chemical attack. Hazmat teams were deployed. The area was cordoned off, but testing found nothing. No chemical residue, no radiation, no accelerants. The burns had appeared without any external source. Hospital examinations only deepened the mystery. The damage penetrated multiple layers of skin, but doctors could find no evidence of external heat. Whatever burned Yuki had come from somewhere else entirely. When she finally regained consciousness, Yuki described entering what she called the bright corridor. Inside, she couldn't feel her body anymore. She was floating, suspended in light, and time moved in ways that made no sense. Minutes felt like hours. She saw flashes of images, Tokyo, but completely transformed. Buildings she didn't recognize, vehicles that moved without sound, people with technology embedded directly into their skin. And then a voice, or perhaps a thought, spoke directly into her mind. It said only 5 words: "You don't belong in this stream." Then she felt herself being thrown violently backward, like passing through shattered glass. She woke up on the grass with her arms screaming in agony. But the most disturbing detail emerged later. Under ultraviolet light, Yuki's burns emit a faint greenish glow. This luminescence has not faded in 5 years. Dermatologists cannot explain it. Tissue samples show cellular damage consistent with intense radiation exposure, yet she displays none of the other symptoms radiation would cause. The patterns on her arms have been photographed extensively. Some researchers have noted they resemble circuit diagrams. Others say they look like mathematical fractals, geometric equations written in scar tissue. Some theorists believe Yuki accidentally intersected with what they call a time stream, a current flowing between different temporal points. The burns may be her body's reaction to existing in 2 moments simultaneously, caught between present and future. Whatever happened to her that morning, the evidence is literally glowing on her skin. And this is only case 9. The next case takes everything even further. Number 8, the sinkhole survivor. This case will make you question everything you think you know about what lies beneath our feet. Imagine you're at work, doing the same job you've done for years. The sun is shining, your crew is around you, and then suddenly the ground opens up and swallows you whole. You fall into darkness, and when you finally crawl back out, you realize that something impossible has happened, not just to the world around you, but to your own body. In November of 2011, a 41-year-old construction foreman named Eduardo Gomes was supervising excavation work on the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil. His crew of 12 was preparing the foundation for a new apartment complex. The weather was clear, safety protocols were being followed, there were no warning signs, no unusual readings, nothing to suggest that anything was about to go horribly wrong. Eduardo had worked construction for nearly 20 years. He knew how to read the ground. But the ground that day had other plans. At exactly 2:34 in the afternoon, the earth beneath Eduardo's feet simply gave way. A massive sinkhole opened without warning, approximately 15 meters across. Eduardo plunged into the darkness below. His co-workers heard his scream, sharp and terrified, and then it cut short. Emergency rescue teams were deployed immediately. They estimated the sinkhole was more than 30 meters deep, connecting to a previously unknown cave system. Rescue workers descended into the void. They searched for hours, but they found nothing. No body, no sign of Eduardo anywhere. After 6 hours, the search was deemed too dangerous to continue. Eduardo Gomes was declared likely deceased. But then, at 8:47 that evening, something impossible happened. Workers near the site spotted movement emerging from the ground, nearly 200 meters away from where Eduardo had fallen. It was Eduardo himself, crawling out of an opening that hadn't existed before, covered in dirt and gasping for air. But when they reached him, they recoiled in shock. His body was covered in severe thermal burns. The patterns were strange, almost spiral in shape, concentrated across his torso and back. His clothes had partially melted into his skin, and Eduardo insisted with absolute certainty that he had been gone for months. Medical examination only deepened the mystery. Eduardo was emaciated, his muscles deteriorated, his body dehydrated far beyond what 6 hours of exposure could explain. Doctors noted that his physical condition was consistent with prolonged starvation, weeks without adequate food or water. But he had only been missing for 6 hours. That was scientifically impossible. Yet the evidence was lying right there on the hospital bed. When Eduardo finally spoke about what happened, his account was terrifying. He described falling into complete darkness, then suddenly being surrounded by blinding heat. He found himself in a vast underground space, but it wasn't a cave. The walls glowed with red and orange light. The air itself was burning. He wandered through endless corridors of fire for what felt like weeks, surviving only on water that dripped from the rocks. There was no day, no night, just eternal burning passages that seemed to stretch on forever. Eventually, he stumbled upon what he called a cold spot, an area where the heat suddenly vanished. He stepped into it, felt himself falling upward, and emerged from the ground 6 hours after he had fallen in. But the nightmare didn't end there. Thermal imaging of Eduardo's body reveals a permanent anomaly. His core temperature remains locked at 39.2 degrees Celsius. It has never normalized. 13 years later, he still runs a constant low fever that doctors cannot explain. He describes it as a sensation of internal warmth that never fades, like something is still burning inside him. His spiral burn scars remain sensitive to touch, flaring with pain at unpredictable moments. Did Eduardo fall through a temporal fissure into a future Earth where our planet has become volcanic? Some researchers believe certain locations contain thin spots where time becomes unstable. Whatever Eduardo experienced in those burning corridors beneath São Paulo, his body is still paying the price. And this is only case 8. Number 7. The physicist who touched tomorrow. This case is unlike anything we've covered so far. It involves a brilliant scientist, a secret experiment, and a discovery so terrifying that it's still burning him decades later. Imagine dedicating 20 years of your life to proving something impossible. Then one night, alone in your laboratory, you finally succeed. But the moment you touch another timeline, that timeline touches you back, and it never lets go. In December of 1994, a 52-year-old theoretical physicist named Dr. Nikolai Volkov was working at a classified research facility outside Novosibirsk, Russia. For 2 decades, Volkov had studied the relationship between intense electromagnetic fields and the structure of space-time itself. He believed that under the right conditions, concentrated magnetic pulses could create micro-tears in the fabric of time. His colleagues thought he was brilliant. Some thought he was mad. But Volkov was certain he was on the verge of something revolutionary. He called his invention the temporal resonance chamber. It was a complex apparatus of coils, generators, and precision instruments designed to focus electromagnetic energy into a single point. On the night of December 14th, Volkov made a decision that would change his life forever. At 3 in the morning, alone in the facility, he activated the chamber at maximum output, far exceeding every safety parameter. What happened next was captured on security footage that still circulates among researchers today. The cameras show a blinding flash erupting from the chamber, and then something impossible. Volkov's body begins flickering, appearing to exist in multiple positions simultaneously, as if 3 versions of him are occupying the same space. The footage lasts only seconds before the chamber overloads and catches fire. When his colleagues found him, Volkov was unconscious on the floor. Severe burns covered 40% of his body, but there had been no fire near him. The burns appeared out of nowhere. When Volkov regained consciousness days later, his account was staggering. He described the moment of activation as stepping sideways through reality. For a fraction of a second, he existed in 3 different times simultaneously. He saw the same laboratory in 3 different eras, the present exactly as it was, a version in ruins, collapsed and abandoned, which he believes was the future, and the lab as bare, empty land, which he believes was the distant past. Each version had a different temperature, and he felt all 3 at once. The future version was burning. Flames consumed everything, and that heat seared directly into his present body. When the chamber failed, he was snapped back into a single moment. But part of him, he insists, remains connected to that burning timeline. The most terrifying evidence came in the years that followed. Since 1994, Volkov has experienced what he calls spontaneous thermal flares. Without any warning, patches of his skin spiked to extreme temperatures. Medical staff at St. Petersburg Hospital have documented episodes where his skin exceeded 48 degrees Celsius, hot enough to burn anyone who touches him. These flares occur 2 to 3 times per month, lasting anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. Thermal imaging during episodes shows the heat originating from deep within his tissue, not the surface. Volkov has meticulously documented over 400 episodes between 1994 and 2022. He believes he's experiencing temporal bleed-through. Heat from the burning future is leaking into his present body. Every flare is another moment where that future timeline reaches through and marks him again. His research notes, recovered from the damaged facility, describe mathematical models for parallel temporal exposure. Some physicists who've reviewed his work call it brilliant. Others dismiss it as dangerous speculation, but no one can explain his documented thermal episodes. If Dr. Volkov really touched another timeline, then time travel doesn't just move you through the years. It marks you, it burns you, and it never truly lets you go. A man scorched by a future that hasn't even happened yet. That thought alone should terrify you. But we're only at case 7. Over 70% of viewers watching right now aren't subscribed. If these cases are keeping you awake, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming in the top 5. Number 6, the twin who came back wrong. This case is deeply unsettling because it involves something that should have been unbreakable: the bond between identical twins. Imagine spending every moment of your life with someone who shares your face, your thoughts, your very existence. Then one evening, she vanishes right in front of you. And when she finally comes back, you realize that whatever returned is carrying something inside her that will never stop burning. In July of 2016, 24-year-old identical twins Sarah and Emma Mitchell drove deep into the Australian outback, approximately 300 kilometers from Alice Springs. Both were amateur astronomers from Melbourne, and they'd planned this trip for months. The goal was simple: spend 2 weeks in one of the most remote locations on Earth, photographing the Milky Way. No cell service, no distractions, just the 2 of them beneath an endless canopy of stars. Sarah and Emma had been inseparable since birth. They finished each other's sentences. They knew what the other was thinking, without speaking. If anyone was safe together in the wilderness, it was them. On day 4 of their expedition, the sisters were exploring rock formations near their campsite as the sun began to set. Emma walked a few meters ahead, while Sarah stopped to adjust her camera equipment. When Sarah looked up, Emma was gone. No scream, no sound of movement, No footprints leading anywhere, just empty red earth where her sister had been standing seconds before. Sarah searched until darkness made it impossible to continue. Then she drove through the night to the nearest town and begged for help. A massive search operation was launched. Helicopters swept the terrain, ground teams combed every kilometer, thermal drones scanned the landscape through the night. 2 weeks of intensive searching found absolutely nothing. No trace of Emma Mitchell anywhere. She was officially declared missing, presumed deceased. Sarah was devastated. Her other half had simply ceased to exist. Then, on day 17, a passing tour group made a discovery that defied explanation. Emma was sitting on a rock at the original campsite, staring blankly at nothing. She was barefoot, severely dehydrated, and covered in sunburn. But when the rescuers got closer, they realized the burns weren't from the sun. They formed geometric shapes across her arms and neck, patterns too precise to be natural, and the burns appeared old, partially healed scarring that would take weeks to develop. But Emma had only been gone 13 days. The scars looked months old. That was medically impossible. Medical examination revealed extreme weight loss and muscle deterioration far beyond what 13 days could explain. When doctors asked Emma what happened, her answer chilled everyone in the room. She said she had been gone for centuries. She described stepping forward and suddenly being somewhere else entirely. The landscape was the same rocks, the same horizon, but the sun above her was enormous and red, bloated in a dying sky. The heat was unbearable. The air itself burned her skin with every breath. She wandered through that scorched world for what felt like hundreds of years, though her body aged only months. Time moved differently there. Each step felt like days passing. Eventually, she found a shadow, a cold zone where the heat couldn't reach her. She stepped into it and woke up back at the campsite. But Emma's nightmare didn't end with her return. Her burns pulse with heat during certain weather conditions. When atmospheric pressure drops, her scars flare and become warm to the touch, as if reacting to something invisible. Sarah watches helplessly as her twin suffers through these episodes. The bond between them couldn't protect Emma from whatever took her. And now, Sarah can only stand by as the burns continue to remind them both that something out there marked her sister forever. Did Emma cross into a far future Earth where our sun has expanded into a red giant? Some scientists believe that's exactly what happened. Whatever the truth, she's still carrying that dying world's heat inside her body. And this is only case 6. The next one will leave you speechless. Number 5. The fisherman who saw the end. This case is terrifying not just because of what happened to the man who lived it, but because of what he claims he witnessed. Imagine you're a seasoned captain with 35 years of experience on the most dangerous waters on Earth. You've survived everything the ocean has thrown at you. Then one night, you pass through something that shouldn't exist. And on the other side, you see how everything ends. Not your life, not your world, everything. In February of 2003, 58-year-old Captain William Drake was commanding the fishing vessel Northern Spirit through the Bering Sea, approximately 200 nautical miles from Dutch Harbor, Alaska. His crew of 6 had worked these waters with him for years. Drake was known as cautious, experienced, and unshakable. He'd seen storms that would make most men pray. He'd never once lost his composure. The weather that night was rough, but manageable. They had all seen worse. None of them were prepared for what was coming. At 11 o'clock that night, the ship's instruments began malfunctioning. The compass spun wildly in circles. The GPS displayed coordinates that couldn't possibly exist. Then the crew noticed something strange happening to the water around the vessel. It was glowing. Not the soft shimmer of bioluminescence that Drake had witnessed before. This was different. Brighter, warmer. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Then the electromagnetic storm hit. Not lightning. Sheets of crackling energy rippling through the air itself. The crew took shelter below deck, but Drake remained at the helm, fighting to steer through the chaos. That's when he saw it. A wall of light rising directly from the water ahead. There was no way to avoid it. The Northern Spirit passed through, and Captain William Drake collapsed unconscious at the wheel. His crew found him 20 minutes later. The storm had passed. The instruments were functioning normally, but Drake was covered in severe burns. Geometric patterns seared across his chest and face. The burns were cauterized, as if branded by something impossibly hot in an instant. Thermal imaging revealed that the patterns continued beneath his clothing. His chest bore a mark shaped like concentric circles, almost like a target. Drake regained consciousness 3 days later in Dutch Harbor Hospital. When asked what happened, his account left doctors and investigators speechless. He described passing through the wall of light and finding himself somewhere else entirely. He was still standing on his ship, but the ocean was gone. The world around him was fire. Flames stretched to the horizon in every direction. The sky above was pure black, but everything below was burning. He heard voices, thousands of them, screaming in agony, and then a single voice spoke directly into his mind, clear and calm amid the chaos. It said only 4 words: "This is what remains." Drake understood in that moment what he was seeing: the end of time itself, the final moment when everything burns. Then he was pulled backward through the light and woke up on his ship, his body searing with pain. But the nightmare followed him home. Drake's burns formed permanent scars that react to extreme cold in impossible ways. When temperatures drop below -10 degrees Celsius, his scars flare with intense heat, as if fighting against the cold. This phenomenon has been documented by Alaskan medical researchers multiple times. The concentric circle pattern on his chest has been photographed and analyzed extensively. Some researchers have noted its striking similarity to diagrams found in theoretical physics papers describing temporal event horizons. Did Captain Drake briefly exist at the end of time, the final moment when the universe itself dies in fire? If the end of everything is a place of burning, then perhaps anyone who glimpses it carries that heat back with them forever. Drake's body remembers what his mind can barely process. A warning branded into his flesh. This is what remains. And this is only case 5. If you're still watching, you're one of the few who can handle what comes next. Subscribe now. The final cases are the ones researchers still cannot explain. Number 4. The artifact that burned through time. This case is unlike anything else on our list because it suggests something deeply unsettling. What if our ancestors possessed technologies we cannot even comprehend? Imagine you're an archaeologist, carefully excavating a 3,000-year-old burial site. You've dedicated your life to uncovering the past. Then your fingers touch something that shouldn't exist. And in that single moment, the past reaches through time and burns itself directly into your flesh. In September of 2018, 31-year-old Dr. Rebecca Chen was leading a university-funded excavation near Glastonbury in Somerset, England. Her specialty was Bronze Age Britain, and this dig had already proven extraordinary. The site showed unusual features from the beginning. The soil composition was unlike anything in the surrounding area. Magnetic readings were inexplicably erratic. Something about this burial mound was different. On day 12, her team uncovered an intact burial chamber. Inside lay human remains surrounded by bronze artifacts. But one object immediately stood out: a small metallic sphere, approximately 8 centimeters in diameter. It wasn't bronze. The material was unknown. The surface was perfectly smooth, impossibly so for something 3 millennia old. The team lead requested Dr. Chen examine it first. She knelt beside the artifact, pulled back her sleeve, and reached out with her bare fingers. The moment her skin made contact, everything changed. A blinding flash erupted from the sphere. Chen collapsed instantly. Team members reported that the artifact became too bright to look at for approximately 3 seconds. When they reached her, her hands were covered in severe burns. But the sphere itself was cool to the touch. It hadn't heated at all. The burns had come from somewhere else entirely. When Dr. Chen regained consciousness, she struggled to describe what had happened. She said the touch triggered a cascade of visions. But these weren't images she watched from a distance. She was physically present in each one. She stood in Bronze Age Britain, surrounded by a ritual circle of robed figures, flames roaring around her. She was inside a medieval cathedral as fire consumed it, smoke filling her lungs until she couldn't breathe. She experienced a World War II incendiary raid, fire falling from the sky like rain. And finally, she found herself in a city she didn't recognize, somewhere in the future, completely engulfed in flames. Each era burned her, and she felt every single one of them simultaneously. The sphere seemed to be a conduit, channeling temporal energy directly through her body. When the visions finally stopped, she was back in the burial chamber. But the damage was done. Her hands were destroyed. Burns covered every inch of skin from her wrists to her fingertips. Medical teams rushed her to the nearest hospital, but doctors had never seen injuries like these. The burn patterns weren't random, they formed symbols. Linguistic experts later examined photographs and identified some markings as resembling Bronze Age script. Others remained completely unidentifiable. The burns appear to tell a story, one that no one alive can fully read. The sphere itself has been analyzed by multiple laboratories. Its material composition doesn't match any known metal or alloy on Earth. Under electron microscope examination, the surface displays patterns that some theoretical physicists claim resemble compressed space-time diagrams, mathematical structures that shouldn't exist on an object buried 3,000 years ago. Was this artifact designed to do exactly what it did? And if so, who created it? Who possessed this knowledge in the Bronze Age? And where did that knowledge come from? Dr. Chen's hands have never fully healed. The symbol-like scars remain sensitive to specific materials. Whenever she touches bronze, the burns flare with fresh pain, as if the connection to that ancient time still exists. Some researchers believe she touched a device built specifically to access different points in time. The burns may be timestamps, marks left by every era the artifact connected her to. If our ancestors had technology we don't understand, what else might be buried beneath our feet, waiting to be touched? And this is only case 4. The next case makes this one seem almost ordinary. Number 3, the man who phases out. This case is absolutely haunting because it never ended. It's still happening right now, as you're watching this. Imagine you're an elite military pilot, handpicked for a classified program so secret that most of it remains redacted to this day. You climb to the edge of space itself, and then something goes wrong, something that tears you between two realities. Now, nearly 40 years later, you're still being pulled back and forth, and every single time it happens, you come back with new burns. Major Thomas Reeves, now retired, was once among the finest test pilots in the United States Air Force. Between 1983 and 1986, he participated in a classified aerospace program operating out of Nevada. The project allegedly explored high-altitude phenomena and what internal documents reportedly called unconventional propulsion. 12 pilots were selected for the program. Only 4 survived. Reeves refuses to name the project even today, but he has given extensive interviews under a pseudonym. What he describes sounds like something from a nightmare you can't wake up from. In March of 1986, Reeves was conducting a test flight at extreme altitude. The specifics remain classified, but he estimates he was approximately 85,000 feet above the Earth. At that height, the sky turns black and the curvature of the planet becomes visible below. That's when his instruments detected something impossible, energy signatures that shouldn't exist, readings that made no scientific sense. Then Reeves experienced what he calls a phase shift. His body became translucent. He could see through his own hands. He felt himself being pulled towards something ahead, a bright point of light that seemed to exist outside of normal space. The aircraft's autopilot engaged emergency return protocols. When Reeves solidified again, he was covered in severe burns. But there had been no fire. His flight suit showed no damage. The burns had appeared underneath his clothing, as if they came from inside his own body. That was 1986. The nightmare has continued ever since. Reeves experiences what he calls temporal episodes. Without any warning, his body begins to phase out again, becoming partially translucent just like it did during that flight. During these episodes, he partially exists in another timeline. He can see both our world and what he calls the burning place simultaneously. One reality overlaid on top of another. Each episode lasts anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes, and every single one leaves new burns on his body. He has meticulously documented over 340 episodes across 38 years. Photographs taken throughout the decades show the progressive scarring. His body is now more than 60% covered in burn tissue. The episodes occur regardless of where he is, what the temperature is, or what he's doing. There is no warning. There is no pattern. There is no way to prevent them. VA hospital records confirm the burn accumulation. Medical staff have witnessed episodes firsthand. Thermal imaging conducted during one documented event showed his body temperature spiking to 47 degrees Celsius in specific areas, while remaining completely normal in others. The burning happens specifically to the parts of his body that phase out most completely. Reeves believes that part of him is permanently trapped in the burning timeline. Each episode pulls more of him into that place, and each time, more of that place's fire follows him back. He describes it as being caught in a doorway that won't fully close. He's not entirely here. He's not entirely there. He exists in both, and both are destroying him slowly. Did the classified program accidentally expose Reeves to another dimension, one defined entirely by fire? If he's truly caught between two timelines, then each phase brings him closer to being fully consumed. Over 340 episodes, over 340 burns, and the count continues to rise. Somewhere right now, as you're listening to this, Major Thomas Reeves might be phasing out again, feeling his body flicker between worlds, and coming back with fresh burns from a place the rest of us will never see. But the next case involves not one survivor, but 4, and what's happening to them is even worse. Number 2, the cave that broke time. This case is deeply disturbing because it didn't happen to just one person. 4 experienced explorers entered a cave system in Mexico. All 4 vanished without a trace, and when they finally emerged 11 days later, something had changed inside them. Something that is still changing, still burning, still spreading across their bodies year after year. Imagine entering a darkness so complete that it swallows everything you know, and when you finally escape, you realize the darkness followed you out. In October of 2009, 4 experienced spelunkers descended into an undisclosed cave system in the Oaxaca region of Mexico. Dr. Miguel Herrera was 46, a geology professor with decades of underground experience. Ana Cortez was 33, a cave mapping specialist. David Moreno was 29, and Isabella Vega was 27. Both were veteran explorers. Together, they had over 40 years of combined experience navigating the most dangerous underground environments on Earth. They entered the cave at 8 in the morning on October 14th with supplies for 72 hours. They planned to map a newly discovered section of the extensive network. None of them knew they were walking into something that would mark them forever. Their last radio contact came at 6:30 that evening. The team reported unusual rock formations deep in the system. Ana described walls that seemed to glow faintly, emitting a soft reddish light with no apparent source. Then the radio went silent. The support team waited at the entrance for the scheduled emergence on October 17th. The 4 explorers never appeared. Rescue operations launched immediately. Search teams found the group's equipment at the end of a dead-end passage. Packs, ropes, lights, everything was there. But the 4 people who carried them had vanished completely. The cave showed no exits, no collapses, no possible route of escape. They had simply ceased to exist. Then, on October 25th, 11 days after they entered, a local shepherd heard sounds coming from the cave entrance. He found all 4 explorers crawling out of the darkness, barely conscious. All 4 were severely burned, malnourished, and confused. But their burns were distributed strangely. Miguel's covered his face. Ana's consumed her arms. David's spread across his torso. Isabella's wrapped around her legs. Different patterns on each body. And all 4 insisted, with absolute certainty, that they had only been inside for about an hour. Medical examination revealed dehydration and starvation, consistent with more than 2 weeks without food. But they had only been missing 11 days, and their supplies were found intact deep in the cave. The timeline made no sense. When questioned separately, all 4 told remarkably consistent stories. They described reaching a massive underground chamber that shouldn't exist. The walls radiated red-orange light. The heat was intense but survivable at first. Time became meaningless inside that space. They couldn't tell if minutes or days were passing. They saw things moving in the light, shadows, structures that appeared and disappeared, faces forming in the glow. The burning was gradual. The longer they stayed, the more it intensified. Eventually, they found a corridor where the heat suddenly stopped, a passage of cold cutting through the inferno. They walked through it for what felt like seconds and emerged 11 days later. But the most disturbing element is what happened after their return. Their burns are progressive. Since 2009, all 4 survivors have experienced gradual expansion of their burned areas. Each year, the damaged tissue spreads approximately 2 to 3 centimeters outward, Medical intervention cannot stop it. Skin grafts fail within months. It's as if the burning is still happening in slow motion, as if part of them remains in that chamber and the fire is still consuming them, just very slowly. David Moreno is now more than 70% covered. Doctors estimate complete coverage within 5 years. Did the Oaxaca 4 enter a temporal pocket where time moves at different rates? If part of them remained in that burning chamber, the fire might never stop. 4 survivors, 4 spreading burns, 4 bodies that may never stop burning. And the final case will change everything you think you understand about time travel. Number 1, the involuntary traveler. This is the case that changes everything. It's the reason we saved it for last. Imagine living with a condition so impossible, so relentless, that you've spent 45 years running from it. You've lived in 14 different countries trying to escape. But no matter where you go, no matter what you do, it finds you. It pulls you through time against your will, and every single crossing burns you. Now, imagine looking in the mirror and seeing almost no unburned skin left. That is the life of the man known only as John. His case came to public attention in 2021 when medical records were leaked from an undisclosed European hospital. Those documents revealed something unprecedented. A patient who had accumulated severe burns over more than 4 decades with no consistent external cause. Doctors across multiple countries had examined him. None could explain what they were seeing. When researchers finally tracked him down and he agreed to speak, the story he told was beyond anything they had prepared for. It began in 1978 in rural England. John was 24 years old, walking home from work on an ordinary evening. Then the sky tore open. A vertical line of light appeared directly above him, and before he could react, he was pulled into it. The crossing was instantaneous, and it was fire. The moment of transition burned his entire left arm. When his vision cleared, he was standing in the same location. But the world around him had changed. The buildings were different. The people wore clothing from another century. He had traveled backward approximately 200 years to Georgian-era England. John existed in the past for what felt like several weeks. He hid, scavenged, survived. Then another tear opened, another violent pull, another burning crossing. This time he landed back in his present, 3 days after he had originally vanished. His arm was destroyed, his mind was shattered, and the nightmare had only just begun. Since 1978, John has experienced over 600 documented temporal jumps. He cannot control them. They happen without warning, sometimes years apart, sometimes mere days. Each crossing burns him. The transition itself is fire. He has traveled to at least 12 different time periods, ranging from medieval England to what he believes is centuries in our future. And the future, he says, is always the same. It is always burning. Every timeline ahead of us ends in fire. John has kept meticulous journals throughout his ordeal, 47 volumes documenting dates, locations, estimated time periods, and the placement of every burn. His body has become a map of temporal crossings. Each scar marks a different jump. Thermal imaging reveals something impossible. Certain scars register temperatures 10 to 15 degrees Celsius above the surrounding tissue. Parts of him are still hot from journeys taken decades ago. But perhaps the most unsettling evidence involves something he said years before it happened. In a 2015 interview, documented and time-stamped, John described a global pandemic that would begin in 2020 or 2021. He spoke of social distancing, masks, and a world that stopped moving. This was recorded 4 years before anyone had heard of COVID-19. He saw it, he lived through it, in another time. In his only recorded public statement, John offered a warning that still circulates among researchers today. He said that time doesn't want us crossing it. Every time he goes through, it burns him, like it's trying to stop him, and what he's seen ahead terrifies him more than the burns ever could. Everything ends in fire, every timeline, every possibility. The burning isn't punishment, it's a warning. Something is coming that consumes everything. Over 600 jumps, over 600 burns. A body that is now more scar than skin, and a warning that the future itself is on fire. Whether John is a prophet or simply a man trapped in an impossible nightmare, one thing is certain. The burns covering his body are undeniably real, and if he's right about what's coming, then the burning hasn't even started yet. 10 survivors, 10 impossible stories, all of them burning from journeys through time that left the marks science cannot erase. What if the fabric of time itself fights back against those who dare cross it? What if every traveler pays a price in fire and pain? We may never know the full truth, but one thing is certain: these burns are real. Subscribe now so you don't miss what we uncover next. The evidence is growing.